Hello, welcome to the Recovery Playbook, brought to you by the Menninger Clinic, a national leader in mental health and addictions treatment. We're your hosts, Dr. Daryl Shorter.
And I'm Ryan Leaf. Our goal is to elevate conversation about substance use and addictions for anyone who may be impacted, including family members.
Our episodes will share real issues and the latest treatments and matters of interest to the recovery community. What's today's topic?
When do you know that you're ready for treatment?
Okay. How did you know?
Anytime anybody else comes to you to talk to you about your behavior around it, that's when you're ready. It is. That's plain and simple. Okay. That's when you're ready.
So when someone expresses concern to you.
Yes, because you have blinders to it. You usually are prescribed it, in my case, of an opioid from a doctor because of an injury.
Yeah.
I've had 15 surgeries. This is what was next. If he would have come to me and say there are symptoms such as 12 years later from now, you may want to break into houses to fulfill your habit. Maybe I have a different approach to how I look at things.
That might be a clue.
So I think anytime someone else sees something and says something,
yeah,
but that doesn't happen that often.
Okay.
Because people are fearful, worried. Should I be doing this? Right. Does he have a problem? All the things that go into it. That's probably when and I think if you're honest with yourself and you see yourself in the mirror every day, I knew a long time before that. I couldn't do it on my own. I think that's a big part of it too, that I couldn't do it on my own. I had to be intervened with. And most people are that way. The ones that are able to do it on their own, they are miracles in my eyes, because people are fearful that they'll lose their job. Also, one of the biggest misconceptions, and I hate this one, and this is what stigma is, it simply is the unwillingness to get the help that you need, because in your eyes it's worse than someone knowing that you need help.
Yeah. It's interesting when they survey people who are either in recovery or who have a substance use disorder. One of the major barriers to accessing care or getting treatment, it turns out, is this belief that you have to do it on your own. This belief that treatment doesn't work and that there's nothing that can be helpful for you. And I think that we kind of play into that, unfortunately, in the medical community, and maybe even perhaps in the recovery community, with this idea that, oh, well, I've got to do this all by myself. I can't possibly take a medicine for this, or I can't possibly go to psychotherapy or engage in treatment for this.
Well, I think that's the stigma.
Yeah.
And it's existed forever. I think in the 80s when, the Reagans, unfortunately, just say no to drugs campaign, affected culture in a way that made people firmly look at drug addicts and people who dealt with substance use disorder as flawed problems.
That's right.
And so if that's the case, you were taught that, like anybody who's raised. You don't come out of the womb thinking this way. You were taught these things, and that belief is a cultural thing that we live in. So when you hear someone goes to treatment, everybody's whispering and it's kind of gossip behind the scenes, instead of someone coming out and saying, "Did you hear that Lucy went to treatment?
Yeah.
How Lucy went to treatment."
Right.
They're not she has cancer. She was able to get into this unbelievably new radical testing.
Exactly.
And she's getting the help that she needs. And that's the difference in the light that needs to be shined on it. And when people understand that about treatment facilities like that, I think I've told you this. I believe that if you're going to college, that after you graduate from college, you should be required to go to 30 days of treatment. Or if you don't go to college after high school, go to 30 days of treatment. And people look at me like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, when would you ever spend 30 days on yourself in self-improvement?
No, never,
Ever.
never. And I think that really speaks to this other issue of raising the bottom, so that people don't necessarily have to hit rock bottom. They don't have to lose everything before they access care, before they make a decision to do something different with their lives.
Yeah, that's a big controversy because of the stigma, right?
Yeah.
The idea that you could preempt something. Well, turns out my grandfather had an alcohol issue that I didn't know about, right? So there may have been a predisposition for me to have that. And as an athlete who had a bit of OCD in terms of how I prepared and how I focused and all those things. It's now when I look back on it, I'm like, it's a no-brainer. Oh, that's a natural kind of fit. And I was really bougie about it. Like I didn't drink a lot of alcohol. I never tried another drug other than one that was prescribed. It worked for me, so I knew that was what worked. And so, as we're seeing now with a lot of things that have been killing Americans, which of course has been overdoses, but another big thing is heart disease
Yeah,
and diabetes,
that's right.
and those things are started to be effectively changed by, a drug to help with that, Ozempic, semaglutide,
Yep, yep, yep.
that allows for that to effectively change what the brain does. And this is a brain disease, and
That's
they all
exactly
are
right.
brain diseases. Vivitrol, which we talked about in an episode previously, is a drug that blocks these opiate receptors.
Mm-hmm.
If you are meeting with your doctor and you talk to him about certain things and maybe some cravings that you start to feel, wouldn't it be amazing if the doctor preemptively could go, hey, I would like to prescribe you this drug. It's Vivitrol. It blocks your opiate receptors. And so you won't crave something that you may in the future.
That's exactly right.
And I don't see where that's a problem other than the fact that people talk about the pharmaceutical generation of our country and how everything can be fixed with a pill.
That's right.
You eat too much, you eat too much fat. Here's some cholesterol medicine.
Yeah.
Keep doing it.
But I think there's something I think in our culture where we are okay with the idea of people being punished for their bad decisions.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about this a lot more where essentially a lot of what we have come to believe about alcohol use, substance use more broadly, really is informed by generations and millennia of religious and moral thinking. This idea that to consume any sort of substance like alcohol, to consume any sort of substance that like a drug is actually sinful. It's actually you're doing harm to your temple, and your temple doesn't belong to you. Actually, it belongs to a higher power, and so you are defiling your temple by ingesting sugar or
Right.
caffeine or whatever the thing is. And I think it's really hard for someone to go from understanding alcohol use or substance use as a sin, where you are defiling your temple, to then leaping to the idea that alcohol use disorder or substance use disorder is a medical condition. That's a big leap for people to have to make. So, what you mean to tell me that this person using drugs, well, that's bad, but then they develop an addiction, and all of a sudden I'm supposed to feel sorry for them because they have a disease or a medical condition? For lots of people, simply does not compute
Well, for probably half the country, it doesn't.
easily. Easily,
And
yeah.
it's that's why it's obviously contentious whenever discussed because people still believe it's not a disease.
That's
They
right.
believe it's a choice.
That's right.
Um,
Much like with obesity, like you mentioned, but
yeah,
people do not believe that obesity is a chronic medical condition. They believe that it is something that someone has done to themselves, and therefore, why should they take a medication for it? Like, you don't deserve to take a medicine for it. You should do all of these other things and exercise, and because that's what you're supposed to do.
yeah. Your brain, by the time your stomach is too full, your brain finally has the chance to tell you.
Yeah.
What if there was a drug that could tell your brain when your stomach was full?
Well, it turns out now there kind of
There
is.
is, and it's incredibly impactful. And if you're telling me that a doctor can prescribe me a medication with my predisposition to crave opioids, in the hopes that I, do not take my bottom to the very bottom, which was a prison cell floor, that it is much higher, that it is when confronted with it, can look at it as like, oh my gosh, I was diagnosed with substance use
Yeah,
disorder. But we caught it early.
that's right.
It's like how we talk about cancer. They caught it early.
That's right.
So now we have a treatment plan in place.
So funny that you bring this up. There has been a recent discussion in the addiction science, addiction treatment world about the concept of pre-addiction. This was something that was proposed by several brilliant minds in addiction medicine and addiction psychiatry, including the director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse, Nora Volkoff. And they have been writing about this concept of pre-addiction, which it is akin to prediabetes. Now, I usually will jokingly say to people, prediabetes didn't exist when I was in medical school.
Right.
Turns out that it's a relatively recent phenomenon for us to talk about prediabetes. It's about 21, 22 years old. I'm dating myself. And But what has prediabetes done for people? It helps you to understand that, well, if I have prediabetes, I have this predisposition to going on to develop diabetes, I can make certain changes in my lifestyle. I can diet, or I can exercise, or I can change my relationship to sugar and salt and all the other things that taste really, really good. But the same thing could be possible for people if we understand pre-addiction. So pre-addiction meaning that maybe there are it's more like a mild substance use disorder where people are beginning to experience some of those consequences, like maybe my family has concerns about my substance use. And that might be the sign that something deeper is in play and I need to seek treatment of some kind. Maybe that's counseling. Maybe it's going for walks. It could be mindfulness. It could be any number of things. This part of the response to pre-addiction has not quite been worked out yet because it's such a new concept. But just think about what that could do for people to understand that pre-addiction exists and that there are some things that I could do to change my lifestyle that might make it less likely that I go on to develop full-blown addiction.
I find too that this generation tends to be more about the why. So they may be more receptive. When you go in and get a blood test and you see the AC1 number,
A1C.
sorry, you go in to see the A1C number, you understand what the pre-diabetes looks like. And that I was in that spot. I had a number that was just below what people are considering where diabetes starts. Yeah. And so you tend to go and try to take action when you have a why.
That's exactly the same concept
Yeah.
that we could see
I'm
at
with
play
you on this one
with pre-addiction.
completely.
It's still very new. Lots of research is still necessary for us to better understand what constitutes pre-addiction, how you intervene in cases of pre-addiction, but I think it could be really helpful for the field moving things forward.
I do too. I'm excited for that. And if you keep listening and watching here on the Recovery Playbook, you're going to hear more about all these new things. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.